If you are listening to this right now, I want to ask you to do one small thing before we begin. Leave a simple affirmation in the comments. I am learning to stay with myself. Typing those words isn't about pretending everything is fine. It's not about convincing yourself that you have it all figured out, or that the weight you've been carrying suddenly feels light. It is just a quiet, deliberate promise to stop running from your own reflection for the next few minutes. It is a decision to sit down in the middle of your own reality and say, just for a moment, I will not walk away from me right now. Because let's be entirely honest about where we are. Self-love sounds beautiful on paper. It sounds peaceful, light, and soft. But when you secretly can't stand the person you are, standard self-love advice doesn't just feel unhelpful. It feels completely out of touch. It feels like someone offering you a glass of water when what you really need is to stop drowning. We are told to look into the mirror, smile, and repeat beautiful phrases about how worthy and capable we are. But inside, the moment those words leave our mouths, a quiet, cold voice immediately calls us a liar. So instead of loving ourselves, we learn to hide. We build an internal room, a small, dark, quiet space inside our own minds, where we stash every piece of ourselves we think is too broken, too messy, or too embarrassing to show the world. And then we step outside that room and put on a show. You know what that show looks like because you play the role every single day. You wake up, look at the schedule for your day, and feel an immediate, crushing wave of exhaustion. It isn't because you didn't sleep enough, and it isn't because the physical work ahead of you is too hard. It is the deep, bone-weary exhaustion of knowing you have to spend another full day inside your own head, pretending to be someone you aren't even sure you like. You go through the motions seamlessly. You make your morning coffee. You drive to work, or you sit at your desk. You smile back at people in the hallway. You reply to text messages with warm, encouraging words. You check every single box of what a functioning, capable adult is supposed to look like. But behind your eyes, you are carrying an invisible, suffocating weight. It is the constant, lingering feeling that everyone else around you was given a secret instruction manual for existing, a guide on how to be confident, how to handle mistakes, how to just be. And you were somehow left out. You watch other people move through their lives with a light step, while you feel like you are constantly stumbling through a script you didn't write, waiting for the moment someone realizes you're just acting. You live in perpetual fear of being seen too clearly. You think, if they really knew how loud my self-doubt is, if they saw how messy my thoughts are, if they knew how much I struggle just to keep up, they would turn away. So you stay in the room. You keep the door locked. You keep your true feelings hidden, even from yourself. You spend your energy trying to make sure no one looks too closely, completely unaware of how much life it takes out of you just to keep up the facade. If you recognize yourself in this description, if you feel like you are endlessly performing for the world while secretly hoping no one notices how tired you are, I need you to hear this clearly. You are not broken. You are not defective, and you are not a failure. You are simply exhausted. You are worn out from carrying the heavy, agonizing burden of hiding from yourself. And it is okay to admit that the act has become too heavy to carry. We live in a world that is obsessed with the idea of the instant turnaround. We love stories about sudden transformations. We watch movies with 2-minute montages where the main character makes one big decision, turns their entire life around, and walks into the sunset completely whole. We scroll through social media and see people who claim that one retreat, one book, one quiet morning, or one sudden realization changed everything for them overnight. And because we see those stories everywhere, we start to believe that real change is supposed to happen in a flash of lightning. We tell ourselves that if we just find the right key, we can flip a light switch in our minds and instantly go from self-hatred to complete, unconditional self-love. But real human healing doesn't work like that. Real change is slow, quiet, messy, and often deeply uncomfortable. And when you secretly don't even like yourself, trying to jump straight into loving yourself isn't just unrealistic. It feels impossible. It's like standing at the bottom of a massive, sheer mountain and trying to leap directly to the peak in a single step. When you land right back where you started, bruised and out of breath, you don't blame the mountain. You blame yourself. Think about a time you tried to force a brand new mindset or a totally new life overnight. Maybe it was a Sunday evening after a really hard week. You were feeling so tired of your own patterns, so disgusted with your own perceived failures, that you decided enough was enough. You bought a fresh notebook, wrote out a detailed routine, and made a firm declaration to yourself. Starting tomorrow, I am going to be a completely different person. I will be organized, calm, endlessly patient, positive, and full of self-respect. For a few hours, you felt a rush of relief. You felt like you were finally fixing the problem. But then Monday arrived. By Tuesday afternoon, life happened. You got tired. You hit a bump in the road. You lost your temper. You missed a task on your list, or a sudden wave of old self-doubt washed over you. And in that exact second, the whole high collapsed. You didn't just see it as a minor misstep in a long process. You saw it as complete and total failure. You threw the notebook aside, closed your eyes, and whispered to yourself, "See? I knew it. I can't even do this right." The heartbreak of that moment wasn't really about the broken routine or the missed goal. It was the crushing weight of having your worst fears confirmed once again. You used that small stumble as proof of what you had secretly suspected about yourself all along, that you are inherently incapable of changing, that you don't have what it takes, and that you are destined to stay stuck. When we set the bar at complete, perfect self-love right away, anything less feels like total defeat. But here is the truth we rarely talk about. You cannot force genuine affection for someone you currently do not trust. And right now, after years of broken internal promises, harsh judgments, and hiding away, the person you distrust most in this world is yourself. You cannot fix a relationship with yourself overnight, just like you couldn't fix a broken relationship with a close friend in 5 minutes. If you spent years criticizing someone, ignoring their pain, and wishing they were someone else, you couldn't just hand them a flower, say, "I love you now," and expect them to trust you. They would step back. They would be suspicious. They would need time to see if you are actually going to stay. Your heart works the exact same way. It doesn't need a dramatic, forced switch. It needs you to stop demanding instant perfection so that you can finally give yourself space to simply take the very first step. Carl Jung once wrote, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." Notice what he said there. He didn't say the most beautiful thing or the most peaceful thing. He didn't promise that accepting yourself would feel like a warm hug or an instant wave of relief. He used the word terrifying. And if you have ever tried to sit quietly with the parts of yourself you dislike, you know exactly how true that is. Why would accepting who you are feel scary? Because accepting yourself means dropping the heavy armor you've spent your entire life constructing. It means putting down the shields, the excuses, and the careful control, and looking directly at the parts of your life you have spent years trying to hide or fix. When you secretly dislike yourself, you spend an enormous, exhausting amount of energy constantly trying to edit your personality. You become a hyper-vigilant director of your own life, endlessly monitoring every word you say, every step you take, and every reaction you have. Think about how this plays out late at night, when the world goes quiet and you are left alone with your thoughts. You lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, and your mind immediately begins running a high-definition highlight reel of your worst moments. You replay a conversation from 3 days ago, cringing at a joke that landed flat, or a moment where your voice shook when you tried to speak up. You replay a minor mistake you made at work, cringing at how foolish you think you must have looked to everyone else. You criticize yourself for being too quiet, or for talking too much, or for being too needy, or for feeling emotional over something small. In those moments, your gut reaction is to push those feelings down. You tell yourself to get over it, to stop being so sensitive, to just be better next time. You try to cut out those inconvenient, fragile parts of yourself, like weeds in a garden. But those unwanted parts don't just disappear when you ignore them. They don't vanish because you judge them. Instead, they recede into the shadows of your mind, like an uninvited guest sitting quietly in the corner of a dark room. And the more you ignore them, the larger their presence feels, until every room you walk into feels haunted by the fear of your own flaws. Acceptance is not about looking at those flawed, hurt, or awkward parts of yourself and pretending they are perfect. It isn't about slapping a smile on your face and declaring that you love your deepest insecurities. Acceptance is something much quieter and much more courageous. It is simply the willingness to stop running away. It is looking at the uninvited guest in the corner and saying, I see you. I know you are here, and I am going to stop fighting you. It means allowing yourself to acknowledge, without judgment, yes, I felt insecure today. Yes, I made a mistake. Yes, I felt jealous, or hurt, or tired. When you stop spending all your energy trying to edit out your flaws, something incredible happens. The terrifying monster in the room shrinks back down to human size. You begin to realize that having flawed, quiet, or uncomfortable parts does not mean you are ruined. It just means you are human, sitting in the quiet work of learning how to stay. It is so dangerously easy to disguise self-hatred as a passion for self-improvement. On the outside, it looks like dedication. It looks like discipline, ambition, and a healthy commitment to growth. You sign up for courses, you stack your shelves with personal development books, you download whole collections of planning applications, and you spend hours organizing digital workspaces or mapping out immaculate daily routines. When people look at you, they see someone who is focused on becoming better, someone who cares deeply about their future. But if you are completely honest with yourself about what is happening beneath the surface, the driving engine behind all that effort isn't love. It is a quiet, desperate panic. It is the haunting, unspoken belief that says, if I can just fix enough things about myself, if I can just become organized enough, polished enough, efficient enough, and calm enough, then maybe, just maybe, I will finally be worthy of respect. Maybe then I will finally be allowed to like who I am. Think about how you react when something goes wrong in your day. Imagine a totally mundane moment. You drop a mug on the kitchen floor and it shatters into pieces. Or you miss a minor detail on a project at work. Or you realize you forgot to reply to a simple message. For someone who naturally likes themselves, a moment like that is just an inconvenience. It's an annoying mistake, but it carries no deeper meaning. They sweep up the glass, they fix the error, and they move on with their afternoon. But for someone who secretly dislikes themselves, that tiny stumble feels like a catastrophic failure. It doesn't just feel like a mistake. It feels like absolute evidence. Your mind doesn't say, that was careless. Your mind immediately leaps to absolute, brutal statements. You see? You always do this. You can't handle basic things. Why are you like this? When your entire journey of self-improvement is fueled by self-contempt, every single day becomes a trial where you are forced to play both the harsh prosecutor and the defenseless defendant. You use your goals not as stepping stones to lift yourself up, but as heavy iron rods to beat yourself with whenever you fall short. If you accomplish 10 tasks on your list, but miss one, your mind ignores the 10 and obsessively interrogates you about the one. You end up living in a perpetual state of conditional acceptance. You tell yourself that you will treat yourself with kindness after you lose the weight, after you fix your habits, after you master your emotions, or after you become the ideal version of yourself you have constructed in your mind. But that conditional future never actually arrives, because every time you reach a goal, the inner critic simply moves the finish line further down the road. The standard becomes higher, the rules become stricter, and the pressure becomes more suffocating. You cannot build a peaceful, compassionate life using tools made of self-punishment. You cannot fix a relationship with yourself by declaring war on who you are right now. True growth doesn't come from hating yourself into a new shape. It comes from realizing that you deserve care and respect even while you are still a work in progress, broken pieces and all. If love feels like a language you don't speak, stop trying to force the words. If telling yourself that you are wonderful, capable, or worthy feels like an outright lie that makes your stomach twist in resistance, give yourself permission to drop the act. You do not need to leap from years of quiet self-contempt directly into glowing adoration. There is a vast, calm, and incredibly healing territory resting right in the middle, and it is called neutrality. Neutrality is the peaceful decision to stop the constant evaluation. It is the simple choice to treat yourself with basic civil decency, even on the days when you are not remotely impressed by your own performance. Think about how you interact with a casual acquaintance, a neighbor down the street, or a new coworker you don't know very well. If they spill a few drops of coffee on their shirt during a morning meeting, you don't stare at them with disgust or spend the rest of the afternoon replaying their mistake in your head. You don't deem them an absolute failure as a human being. You extend a low-stakes, simple courtesy. You pass them a napkin, offer a polite smile, say, "No big deal," and move on with your day. You don't have to love them deeply to treat them with basic human dignity. Self-neutrality is simply extending that exact same courtesy inward. It is the practice of letting yourself exist without constantly running a harsh commentary on every action you take. Imagine what that looks like in the middle of a normal, chaotic day. You take a wrong turn while driving, or you burn your toast, or you forget a small errand on your way home. In the past, those tiny moments were the sparks that lit a fire of self-criticism. The immediate reaction was a sharp, biting internal remark. "Of course you did that. You're so foolish." Neutrality steps into that exact moment and strips away the dramatic judgment. Neutrality looks at the burned toast and says, "The toast is burned. I will throw it away and make another piece, or I will eat something else." It looks at the wrong turn and says, "I missed the exit. I will let the map reroute and take the next turn." There is no grand declaration of self-love required there. You don't need to look at your mistake and try to find a deep, beautiful spiritual lesson in it. You just need to clean the pan, reroute the map, and skip the harsh commentary. When you practice neutrality, you allow yourself to drop the exhausting burden of constantly deciding whether you are good enough or bad. You stop treating every single day like a performance that needs to be graded. You begin to observe your life instead of constantly prosecuting it. You learn to look in the mirror in the morning, and instead of forcing yourself to say, "I am beautiful and strong," you simply look at your face and say, "This is my face today. This is the body that carried me through yesterday, and it is the body that will walk with me through today." That simple shift removes the immense pressure that has been crushing you for so long. Neutrality creates a quiet, safe buffer zone inside your own head. It gives your weary spirit a place to sit down, catch its breath, and rest. And in that quiet space, free from the noise of constant self-defense, the very first seeds of genuine peace can finally take root. We often sit in the quiet moments of our lives and wonder where this heavy, persistent dislike came from in the first place. Why is it so easy to offer gentle patience to total strangers, but so hard to extend even a sliver of that same grace to ourselves? Carl Jung offered a deeply compassionate framework for understanding these hidden, buried parts of our minds when he observed, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." What he meant is that we all carry a shadow, a quiet, hidden cellar inside ourselves, where we store every emotion, thought, and urge that we were taught was unacceptable. When you were younger, you might have learned that expressing anger made you difficult. You might have realized that showing sadness made people uncomfortable, or that admitting you needed help made you look weak. So, to keep the peace and stay accepted, you took those raw, uncomfortable feelings and shoved them down into the dark. You tried to bury them under neat routines, agreeable smiles, and perfect performance. But those buried pieces don't just vanish because you hid them away. They linger beneath the surface of your conscious life, quietly influencing every reaction, every relationship, and every thought you have about who you are. You notice this happening in the most sudden, unexpected moments. Maybe a friend or coworker shares some wonderful news, a promotion, a beautiful relationship, a major accomplishment. On the surface, you smile, offer congratulations, and say all the right things. But deep in your chest, your immediate knee-jerk reaction is a sharp, bitter sting of envy or resentment. And almost instantly, the shame follows. You immediately turn on yourself with brutal intensity. What is wrong with me? How could I be so small-minded? What kind of horrible person feels resentful towards someone they care about? Instead of pausing to ask why that sting of resentment was there, you immediately judge yourself for having the emotion at all. You stack a thick layer of shame on top of a raw feeling, convincing yourself that your internal world is irredeemable and rotten at its core. But those heavy shadow emotions are almost never proof that you are a bad person. They are rarely evil. They are usually just exhausted, unaddressed signals pointing straight to the places where you feel unfulfilled, unprotected, or deeply afraid. That sudden sting of envy wasn't about wanting your friend to fail. It was a desperate, aching cry from a part of you that feels left behind, unacknowledged, and terrified that there isn't enough good in the world left for you. When you spend your whole life running away from your shadow, you turn your internal world into a terrifying maze. Every time a shadow emotion pops up, whether it's envy, grief, anger, or deep weariness, you try to outrun it. But you cannot outrun something that is an intrinsic part of your own being. Healing begins when you stop sprinting away from the dark corners of your own mind. It starts when you feel that sharp wave of envy or anger, and instead of punishing yourself for it, you take a slow, quiet breath and say, "I see you. It makes sense that I feel this way. Right now, where is this pain coming from?" When you bring those exiled parts of yourself out into the open light, without judging them, without prosecuting them, and without trying to force them away, they lose their power to haunt you. You realize that your shadow isn't a monster trying to destroy you. It's just a scared, forgotten part of yourself waiting for you to finally stop running and welcome it back home. Trust is not built through massive, dramatic gestures. It is built through small, consistent interactions over time. Think about how trust works between two people. If you have a friend who constantly makes grand, sweeping promises, promising to help you move, promising to meet you for dinner, promising to be there whenever you need them, but every single time the day arrives, they send a last-minute text to cancel. What happens? You don't necessarily hate them, and you might still care about them, but you stop relying on them. You stop believing what they say. You stop reaching out when you need real support, because deep down, you've learned that their words carry no real weight. This is precisely what we do to ourselves every single day, over and over again. When we feel a sudden rush of motivation, we turn to ourselves and make massive, overwhelming declarations. We sit down on a Sunday night, feeling the heavy weight of our current life, and we promise ourselves the world. Starting tomorrow, I am going to read a book every week, wake up at 5 in the morning, stop every bad habit, work out for 2 hours a day, and completely transform the way I live. We feel a fleeting high when we make the promise, because for a split second, it feels like we are fixing everything. But by Wednesday afternoon, the sheer exhaustion sets in. The initial high vanishes, life gets busy, energy runs low, and we break every single promise we just made. And in that moment of breaking the promise, a quiet, invisible crack forms in our foundation. We don't just feel disappointed about the missed habit. We absorb a deeper, more damaging lesson. I cannot rely on myself. My word means nothing to me. When you break thousands of these grand promises over the course of years, your self-trust completely erodes. You become someone who secretly believes that any effort you make is eventually going to collapse. If you want to heal that relationship, You have to stop making grand promises. You have to stop trying to prove your worth through impossible overhauls. Instead, you have to begin the slow, humble work of keeping microscopic commitments. To rebuild self-trust, you must make promises so small, so unbelievably simple, that failure becomes nearly impossible. Don't promise yourself that you will read a chapter of a dense book every single night. Promise yourself that you will open the cover and read just one single page. Don't promise yourself that you will completely change your entire work routine. Promise yourself that before you start your day, you will sit quietly at your desk and take 3 deep breaths. Don't promise yourself that you will become an effortlessly positive person overnight. Promise yourself that when you wake up, you will drink 1 glass of water before you step into the noise of the world. When you make a promise that tiny and actually keep it, something remarkable begins to happen inside your mind. You take a step toward rebuilding an ancient, broken connection. You look at your reflection at the end of the day and realize, I said I was going to do 1 small thing for myself today, and I actually did it. That single moment won't magically solve all your problems. It won't instantly turn your life into a masterpiece. But day by day, kept promise by kept promise, those microscopic victories stack up like bricks in a fortress. You begin to teach your weary mind a brand new truth. I am no longer someone who abandons myself. I am someone who shows up, even in the smallest ways. One of the quietest, hardest parts of true healing is learning how to sit with uncomfortable emotions without immediately trying to run away from them, fix them, or numb them out. When a sudden wave of self-doubt hits, or when an agonizing feeling of inadequacy settles into your chest, your brain's instant reflex is self-defense. The discomfort feels so sharp, so heavy, and so suffocating that your mind treats it like a physical emergency. You feel an overwhelming urge to escape your own skin. You want to stop feeling the ache right now, by any means necessary. So, you reach for your escape routes. You open your phone and scroll endlessly through endless feeds of short videos and social media updates, hoping the constant stream of colors and sounds will drown out the quiet voice inside your head. Or you flip through television channels without actually watching anything. Throw yourself into mindless busywork, or reach for snacks you aren't even hungry for. You move frantically from one distraction to another, constantly staying 1 step ahead of your own feelings. Think about what happens in the exact second that urge to escape kicks in. Imagine you are sitting at your desk or resting at home. You are trying to focus on a task, or maybe you are just trying to enjoy a quiet moment of rest. Suddenly, out of nowhere, a cold wave of anxiety washes over you. A thought whispers, "You aren't doing enough. You are falling behind. You aren't handling your life properly." In that precise moment, your body tightens up. Your breathing becomes shallow, your shoulders tense, and your hand automatically reaches out for your phone or opens a new tab on your screen to escape the rising tension. It is a completely automatic reflex, a desperate attempt to avoid feeling the sting of your own mind. In that split second, I want you to try doing something radical. Try doing absolutely nothing. Don't open the phone. Don't fight the feeling. Don't argue with the thought. And don't try to force yourself to feel positive. Just freeze for 10 seconds. Take a slow breath. Lower your tight shoulders and allow the uncomfortable emotion to sit in the room with you. Let it exist right next to you without giving it control of your hands or your actions. When you first sit still with your discomfort, it feels scary. It feels like the feeling will consume you entirely. But if you can stay present for just 10 or 20 seconds without reaching for a distraction, you start to discover a profound truth. Uncomfortable thoughts and painful feelings cannot physically harm you. They are heavy, they are unpleasant, and they are exhausting. But they are just emotions passing through your nervous system. When you stop running from your discomfort, you take away its power. You realize that you don't have to panic every time you feel insecure or sad. You don't have to fix every bad mood the second it arrives. You prove to yourself that you are strong enough to hold space for your own pain. You show your heart that even when the room inside your mind gets dark, heavy, and quiet, you have the courage to stay right where you are. Pay attention to the tone of voice you use when talking to yourself in empty rooms. When no one else is around to listen, when the day's work is done and you are left alone with your own thoughts, what does that internal voice actually sound like? Is it the voice of a supportive mentor, someone who sees how hard you are trying and offers patient, steady guidance? Or is it the voice of a relentless critic, a harsh, cold evaluator who has already decided that no matter what you do, you will inevitably fall short? Most of us speak to ourselves in ways we would never dream of speaking to anyone else. We use words with ourselves that we would never use with a friend, a coworker, a neighbor, or even a complete stranger on the street. If a friend came to you, tears in their eyes, carrying the weight of a painful mistake or a difficult day, you would never look them in the eye and say, "You are so foolish. You ruin everything you touch. Why can't you just get your life together like everyone else?" The very thought of saying that to someone you love makes your stomach turn. It feels cruel, unnecessary, and deeply destructive. Yet when we make a mistake, that exact level of cruelty becomes our automatic, default internal response. Think about how this plays out in a normal moment. Imagine you give a presentation at work that doesn't go smoothly, or you fail an important exam, or you fumble your words during a critical conversation. The moment you step away from the situation, your inner critic leaps into action. It doesn't just point out where things went off track. It attacks your entire character. It uses absolute, sweeping statements. You always mess up when it matters. You're just not smart enough for this. You're an embarrassment. When we hear that brutal narrative repeated day after day, we begin to absorb it as objective truth. We stop seeing it as just a temporary thought and start accepting it as the literal blueprint of who we are. When people talk about fixing this, the standard advice is often to flip the switch entirely, to replace those negative thoughts with glowing, radiant affirmations. But if you are sitting in the painful aftermath of a real mistake, and you try to force yourself to repeat phrases like, "I am brilliant, perfect, and unstoppable," your mind immediately rejects it. It feels absurd, fake, and completely unhelpful. It feels like painting over rust. Underneath the bright new layer of paint, the structure is still corroding. Reframing your inner voice doesn't mean becoming your own toxic cheerleader. It simply means becoming a fair, objective observer. Instead of trying to jump from brutal self-contempt to exaggerated praise, aim for basic fairness. When you catch your mind spiraling into absolute statements like, "I ruin everything I try," pause and gently pull the thought back toward reality. Shift the narrative from "I ruin everything" to something grounded and real. I made a specific mistake on this project today. It feels disappointing, but I can take steps to figure out how to handle it. You don't need to lie to yourself. You don't need to pretend that every mistake is a secret blessing or that every failure is a triumph. You just need to speak to yourself with the same basic courtesy, fairness, and calm objectivity that you would offer to any human being who is trying their best to navigate a complicated world. When you change the tone of that quiet internal conversation, you stop living in an internal war zone, and you finally make your own mind a safe place to return to. Self-love is rarely the grand, sunlit mountaintop where you float above the world, completely free from doubt, fear, or insecurity. That is a fantasy, and holding on to it only makes the quiet struggles of real life feel like evidence of failure. Real self-love is something far more grounded, far simpler, and infinitely more courageous. It is the steady, quiet commitment to not abandon yourself when things get difficult. It is easy to be on your own side when the sun is shining, when a project goes well, when people offer sincere compliments, when your energy is high, and when your plans fall neatly into place. Staying with yourself feels effortless. But the true test of your relationship with yourself never happens on the easy days. It happens in the quiet, heavy hours when everything feels like it is falling apart. Think about what happens on the days when you wake up already feeling defeated. You carry an unexplainable weight in your chest. Your thoughts are tangled and slow, and that old, familiar voice of self-criticism starts knocking at the door of your mind. You look at your to-do list and feel entirely overwhelmed. You look in the mirror and dislike what you see. You look at your progress in life and feel like you are hopelessly behind everyone else. In those exact moments, your oldest habit is to take sides against yourself. You join the voice of the critic. You punish yourself for being tired. You scold yourself for feeling insecure. And you retreat into the dark, internal room of shame, wishing you could be anyone else on earth, except the person standing in your shoes. Staying with yourself means making a completely different choice in those heavy moments. It means that when you feel insecure, tired, or deeply critical of your own progress, you pause, lower your tight shoulders, take a slow breath, and make the quiet decision to remain in your own corner. It means saying to yourself, I am having a hard time today, but I am not going to turn against myself because of it. I am going to stay right here. You do not have to like every single version of yourself to treat the person in the mirror with basic human decency. You don't have to feel proud of every mistake or pretend that your flaws don't hurt. You simply have to stop treating your own heart like a place you need to run away from. When you choose to stay, you stop waiting for someone else to step in and grant you permission to exist. You stop waiting for perfect circumstances to give you peace. You begin to understand that being a human being is an ongoing, messy, and deeply complicated process. There will be days of clarity and warmth, and there will be days of cold, confusing fog. Neither state defines your fundamental worth. Start with neutrality. Start with small, microscopic promises that you actually keep. Allow yourself to feel uncomfortable without reaching for a distraction. Speak to yourself with the same basic fairness you would offer a friend. And slowly, day by day, breath by breath, you will discover something quiet and profound. You will realize that the room inside your own mind is no longer a dark place you need to hide in, or a war zone you are desperate to escape. It becomes a quiet, safe home, a place where you can finally put down the heavy armor, sit down with your true self, and realize that you were worthy of staying with all along. If you have stayed here through this entire journey, through every section, every quiet realization, and every uncomfortable truth, I want to ask you to do one final thing before we close this space. Leave a simple affirmation in the comments below. I am staying right here with myself. Typing those words isn't a performance for anyone else. It isn't about proving to the internet or to the world that you are suddenly healed, or that you will never experience a moment of self-doubt again. It is a quiet, grounded marker in the dirt. It is a signal to your own nervous system that after years of running, editing, hiding, and waiting for a magic switch to turn on, you are finally ready to inhabit your own life. We spend so much of our existence treating our internal world like a place we are just passing through, or worse, a place we are trying to escape. We look at other people and envy the way they seem to move through the world with lightness and ease. We watch them laugh, handle mistakes effortlessly, and step into rooms with natural confidence, and we assume they possess some fundamental secret that was kept from us. We convince ourselves that until we achieve that exact same ease, until we fix every awkward habit and erase every painful shadow, we are merely rehearsing for a life that hasn't started yet. But life is not waiting for you on the other side of perfection. Your life is happening right now, in the middle of the mess, in the middle of the unfinished projects, the broken routines, and the quiet mornings where you still aren't sure how you feel about the person looking back at you in the mirror. Learning to love yourself when you secretly dislike yourself was never about forcing a sudden, dramatic transformation. It was never about standing in front of a mirror and trying to persuade yourself of something your heart wasn't ready to believe. It was always about the quiet, humble work of stepping back into your own room. Think back over the ground we have walked together. It began by recognizing the room we hide in, that exhausting internal space where we stash our true, messy selves while presenting a polished, capable performance to the rest of the world. We realized just how heavy that act is to carry day after day. We dismantled the myth of the instant switch, forgiving ourselves for failing to change our entire lives overnight, and recognizing that real trust is built slowly, breath by breath, step by step. We stopped sprinting away from the unwanted guest within, choosing instead to drop the heavy armor and sit quietly with the uncomfortable, fragile parts of ourselves that we spent years trying to edit out. We exposed the trap of constant self-improvement, recognizing how easily self-contempt can wear the mask of dedication and discipline, driving us into an endless cycle of conditional self-worth where the finish line is always moving. When love felt like a distant, foreign language, we claimed the then healing territory of neutrality. We gave ourselves permission to drop the grand declarations and simply treat ourselves with basic civil decency, cleaning the burned pan, rerouting the map, and skipping the harsh, biting commentary. We stopped running from the shadows in our minds, learning that our envy, anger, and weariness were not proof that we are broken, but unaddressed signals pointing straight to where we feel unprotected and unfulfilled. We began the quiet work of rebuilding self-trust through microscopic promises, not by promising the world on a wave of temporary motivation, but by drinking one glass of water, reading one page, or taking 3 slow breaths before stepping into the noise of the day. We learned to sit still in the discomfort of our own skin, freezing for just 10 or 20 seconds when the urge to distract ourselves struck, proving to our hearts that uncomfortable emotions cannot physically harm us. We paid attention to the tone of our inner voice, stepping away from brutal self-criticism without falling into toxic positivity, choosing instead to speak to ourselves with the objective fairness and calm courtesy we would extend to any human being doing their best. And finally, we made the foundational commitment to stay with ourselves, promising that on the heavy days, when the fog is thick and the old self-doubt returns, we will not take sides against our own hearts. This epilogue is not an ending. It is a point of return. There will be days ahead where you forget everything we discussed. There will be mornings where you wake up tired, look in the mirror, and feel that old, familiar wave of disappointment wash over you. You will make mistakes. You will fumble your words, break a routine, or catch your mind spiraling into harsh judgments. When those days arrive, do not treat them as proof that you have failed or reverted to square one. Take your very first slow step back into your own life. Thank you for being here.